Opening our eyes gives us access to a world of colors and brightness. According to a Latin lyric poet, Horace, what we learn only through the years makes less impression upon our minds than what is presented to the trustworthy eye. That is probably why the eye is also called the jewel of the body. In this lesson, you will learn about the structure and working of a human eye, defects of vision, and the remedies for these defects. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to explain the structure and working of a human eye, identify the significance of the power of accommodation, identify the causes and symptoms of a cataract, explain the need for two eyes, identify the common defects of vision: myopia, hypermetropia, and presbyopia. Identify the corrective measures to deal with the defects of vision. Define power of a lens. And identify the expression for determining the power of a lens. You can identify a flower by smelling and touching it, but you can't identify a color without the sense of vision. Hear that honking sound? It's probably a car coming around the corner, right? Can you guess what kind of a car it is? Not really. Not without looking at it. The human eye is the organ of sight for human beings. Your eye transforms light waves reflected from objects that you see into images. The information about these images is then sent to your brain. Based on this information, your brain creates a picture of what you look at. This is how your eye enables you to see. Your eyes can also sense geographic directions, movement and color of objects, and light sources. In a technical sense, your eye can be considered an optical device. That is, an instrument of vision that detects light. Let's look at how this optical device works. First, we'll examine the structure of the eye. A human eye is spherical in shape, with a diameter of approximately 1 inch. It constitutes about 30 major and minor parts. Let's start with the sclera, or sclerotic. Sclera is a tough white fibrous tissue that protects and contains the internal parts of the eye. The next part is the cornea, a tough membrane covering the front surface of the eye that is bulged out. The cornea refracts the light that enters the eye. Behind the cornea lies a jelly-like substance called the aqueous humor. It enables the eye to cope with the changes in the atmospheric pressure. The iris forms the colored part of the eye. The iris adjusts the size of a tiny hole called the pupil to control the amount of light entering the eye. The next part of the eye is the crystalline lens. The crystalline lens is a transparent, biconvex structure in the eye, which, along with the cornea, helps to refract light so that it can be focused on the retina. The ciliary muscle is a ring-like structure attached to the iris. It helps focus images by contracting or relaxing as required to change the shape and focal length of crystalline lens. Thus, it ensures proper vision by changing the focal length of the eye lens based on the distances of objects in the line of vision. The space between the lens and the retina in the eye is filled with a clear, dense, jelly-like fluid called vitreous humor. The vitreous humor helps focus the image clearly on the retina and maintains the shape of the eye. The innermost part of the eye is called the retina. The retina may be considered as the screen where an image is formed when light passes into the eye. The retina is spread all through the interior of the eye behind the lens, forming a canopy of the nerve endings of the optical nerves. The retina contains two main types of light-sensitive cells, called rods and cones. Through optical nerves, the retina connects the eye to the brain. When retina receives an optical image, it converts the image into optical impulses and relays these impulses to the brain through the optical nerve. The brain then interprets these signals to an image of the object viewed through the eye. That's how the eyes help us to see. Here is a quick summary of the various parts of the eye and their functions. Now let's see how these parts come together to help us see when we are looking at something. When light rays reflect from an object towards an eye, the cornea refracts these rays so that they are incident on the lens. The cornea is responsible for maximum refraction of the light incident on the eye. With the help of involuntary movement of the ciliary muscles, the iris and the pupil control the light entering the eye and incident on the lens. The crystalline lens, being biconvex in nature, refracts the light rays it receives. It helps in final focusing of the light on the retina to form a real image. The retina converts the light energy of the image into electrical impulses using light-sensitive nerve cells called rods and cones. The rod cells are responsible for the perception of the brightness of light, and the cone cells for the perception of color. The electric impulses from the retina are relayed to the brain by the optic nerve. These impulses indicate the brightness and color of the image to the brain. The brain interprets these impulses and produces the sense of vision. Sounds like a long process, doesn't it? The amazing thing is that the eye completes this process in a fraction of a second, enabling us to see. The way your eye enables you to see is very similar to the functioning of another common optical device, the camera. To form images, all SLR cameras use the same principles of refraction of light rays by lenses and interpretation of colors and brightness. Similar to the iris in the eye, a camera has an iris diaphragm to control the light entering the camera. The screen that contains a photographic film in a camera is similar to the retina in the eye. When we use a camera to ensure clarity of images, we adjust the focal length of its lens based on the distance of the object. How does your eye do that? What happens when you switch from reading a newspaper to looking at the television at the end of the room? Or look up to see a plane in the sky? As mentioned earlier, ciliary muscles help obtain the focus of objects located at different distances. Your eye can change the focal length of the lens in a fraction of a second when you look at another object. This ability of the eye to change focus for objects at different distances by altering the curvature of the lens is called accommodation. For an object to be seen clearly, the image must be formed on the retina. The distance between the lens and the retina is fixed. So, how do you think the eye is able to focus on objects at different distances? Remember the relation between the object distance u, image distance v, and focal length f of a lens? Let's refresh your memory. The relation between the object distance u, image distance v, and focal length f is represented by the expression 1 divided by f is equal to 1 divided by v minus 1 divided by u. In this relation, all distances are measured from the center of the lens. Applying this formula for the eye, image distance is the distance between the lens and the retina, which remains constant. The object distance is the distance of the object from the eye lens, which may vary. Therefore, to form a clear image of different objects at different distances from the eye, the focal length of the eye lens has to be changed. And how do we do that? By altering its thickness, of course. For example, to focus on a distant object, the eye needs to increase the focal length of the lens. To do this, the thickness of the lens should be decreased. Conversely, to decrease the focal length, the thickness of the eye lens should be increased. To accomplish this task, ciliary muscles are used. The contraction and relaxation of these muscles helps to alter the curvature of the lens. For instance, let's revisit the scenario when a person switches from reading the paper to looking at the television at the end of the room. As the television set is relatively far from the eye, the light rays from the television are almost parallel and do not require much convergence to be focused on the retina. Hence, the focal length of the crystalline lens needs to be increased to focus on the images on the television. In such situations, the ciliary muscles relax. This decreases the lens thickness, in turn increasing the focal length for clear vision. On the other hand, the light rays from an object located close to the eye, like the newspaper, are divergent and require relatively more convergence. Therefore, to focus on such objects, the focal length of the lens should be decreased. This happens when the lens is comparatively thicker. Therefore, to focus on objects closer to the eye, in this case the newspaper, the ciliary muscles contract. This increases the lens thickness, in turn decreasing the focal length. In this way, accommodation of lens helps us to focus on objects at different distances and see things clearly. So, think about what happens when Jerry switches from looking at the sunset to solving his physics problems. Do you think his ciliary muscles need to work in this scenario? Let's see. Looking at the sunset, Jerry is seeing a distant object. However, when he works on his physics questions, he is looking at his notebook closer to his eyes. The ciliary muscles in his eyes will need to accommodate this change in distance. Long exposure of the eyes to ultraviolet light, effects of diabetes, hypertension, and old age can result in a condition called cataract. People suffering from cataract display a cloudy, translucent eye lens. Cataract affects the ability of the eye to accommodate the change of distances. As a cataract matures, the cloudiness on the lens increases. This reduces the amount of light entering the eye, resulting in significant loss of vision, sometimes blindness. An appropriate surgical procedure or laser treatment can rectify a cataract in most cases. So, how far does the power of accommodation of our eyes stretch? Can it accommodate images of objects at just about any distance? Not really. The power of accommodation provided by our eyes does have its limits. We cannot see distinct images of objects that are too far from or too near to our eyes. Far point is the maximum distance from the eye at which the eye can obtain a focused image of an object without straining. Similarly, near point is the minimum distance at which eye can obtain a focused image of an object without straining. This means that to view an object clearly, a minimum distance of the object from the eye should be ensured. This minimum distance required between the object and the eye to view the object comfortably is called the least distance of distinct vision. For a normal healthy eye, the least distance of distinct vision is 25 centimeters. Remember the times when your parents told you not to read in bed, or to keep the book further away from your eyes? Do you understand why now? In order to avoid undue strain on our eyes, we all need to ensure a minimum distance of 25 centimeters between our eye and our books while reading. Considering what a single eye can achieve, don't you wonder why we need two eyes? Wouldn't one eye be enough to see all that we want to? Well, here are some interesting facts about your eyes. The horizontal field of view for a single eye is 150 degrees. To provide a wider field of view, say 180 degrees, you need to see with both your eyes. This happens because each eye receives a different image of an object on its retina. These images are about 2 inches apart. This is especially true when an object is close to your eyes. The brain can determine the exact location of the object by combining images from both eyes. This positioning of eyes, known as stereo vision position, helps us to see the maximum possible number of objects around us. Two eyes together provide you the visual ability to see the world in 3 dimensions. That is, they give you the ability to gauge depths. This is very useful while walking or judging distances. Try these activities to better understand the need of 2 eyes. Threading a needle with one eye closed, and catching a ball with one eye blindfolded. You will find yourself struggling with the thread. As for catching the ball while seeing with only one eye, you should be very careful when catching the ball, or else the ball may hit you. This is because with one eye, you are likely to misjudge the distance. In a defect-free eye, light rays focus exactly on the retina, and the object that reflects the rays is therefore seen clearly. Thus, a defect-free eye provides sharply focused vision at all possible distances. However, you would have noticed that many people, as they grow older or sometimes even as kids, need the aid of contact lenses or spectacles to read or to see properly. That's because of eye defects. Some factors that can cause irregularities in vision are irregularities on the surface of the cornea, development of cataract, weakening of ciliary muscles, and change in the size of the eyeball. These irregularities can lead to three major types of vision defects: myopia, hypermetropia, and presbyopia. Let's look at each of these defects in detail. Look at the image of the clock tower as it appears to Uncle Tom without his glasses. As you can see, the image is indistinct. This is because Uncle Tom is suffering from myopia. Myopia is a defect in which a human eye can see nearby objects clearly, but distant objects appear blurred and unclear. Myopia is also known as short-sightedness or nearsightedness. Myopia occurs when the converging power of the eye lens is higher than normal. In such cases, the ciliary muscles do not relax sufficiently. Due to this, the parallel light rays that are reflected from a distant object are focused at a position before the retina, instead of on a position on the retina. So, how can you correct myopia? Myopia can be corrected by placing a suitable concave lens in the line of sight. When this is done, the parallel beam of light reflected from a distant object is first diverged by the concave lens and then converged by the eye lens to focus on the surface of the retina. The higher the power of the lens required, the heavier is the lens, and the thicker is the edge of the lens. The rectification lens for myopia is also referred to as the diverging lens, as it serves to correct the defect by diverging the incident light beam. Here is Mr. Smith enjoying a leisurely evening. He is able to see the tree across the road clearly. However, when he opens the newspaper, the newsprint appears blurred to him. Why does the newsprint appear blurred to Mr. Smith even though he can view the tree across the road clearly? Because his eyes are suffering from hypermetropia. Hypermetropia is a defect of vision in which a human eye has problems seeing objects located nearby clearly. However, an eye that has hypermetropia can see distant objects clearly. This condition is also known as long-sightedness or far-sightedness. Hypermetropia occurs when the converging power of the eye lens is less than normal. This happens because the ciliary muscles become weak and are unable to alter the lens size as required. Due to this, the parallel light rays that are reflected from any objects located nearby are focused at a position behind the retina instead of on the retina. So what's the solution for this condition? Like myopia, hypermetropia can be corrected by placing a suitable lens in the line of sight. However, in this case, you'd use a convex lens instead of a concave lens. When this is done, the parallel beam of light reflected from a nearby object is first converged by the convex lens, and then by the eye lens to focus on the surface of the retina. The higher the power of the lens required, the thicker the center of the lens, and therefore the heavier the lens. The rectification lens for hypermetropia is also referred to as the converging lens, as it converges the beam of light incident on it. Now let's meet Mr. Foley. He is reading a book. Do you see anything unnatural about this scene? Mr. Foley seems to be holding the book unnaturally far, right? This could be because he is suffering from presbyopia. Presbyopia is a condition in which the crystalline lens of an eye loses its flexibility. Persons suffering from presbyopia are unable to read or see clearly, even at the least distance of distinct vision, which is 25 centimeter. Presbyopia occurs in old age, when the ciliary muscles lose the elasticity required to change the focus of an enlarged eye lens. Loss of flexibility makes it difficult for the eye to focus properly. That is, the accommodation of the normal eye is no longer applicable. This condition is a combination of myopia and hypermetropia. To correct presbyopia, a bifocal lens is used. In a bifocal lens, the upper part is a concave lens to correct myopia, and the lower part is a convex lens to correct hypermetropia. Other corrective measures for presbyopia include reading glasses, trifocals, or contact lenses. The corrective measures are chosen depending on whether any other eye defects are observed. As we mentioned earlier, defects of vision can be corrected using proper converging or diverging lens or a bifocal. So, exactly how thin or thick does a lens need to be? This depends on the power of the lens required, that is, the converging or diverging capacity required. The converging or diverging capacity depends on its focal length. For a higher converging or diverging capacity, we need lenses of a greater thickness, and hence a smaller focal length. Similarly, a thin convex lens has a larger focal length, and hence its convergence is lower. Thus, the converging capacity of a convex lens and its focal length are inversely related. Numerically, the power of a lens is the reciprocal of its focal length expressed in meter. The SI unit of power of a lens is diopter and is denoted by D. Usually, the focal length of a convex lens is considered positive. Hence, its power is also positive. Similarly, the focal length of a concave lens is considered negative. Hence, its power is negative as well. Therefore, individuals suffering from hypermetropia use spectacles with positive power lenses. Similarly, those suffering from myopia use negative power lenses to correct their vision. We can determine the focal length of the corrective lens for myopia or hypermetropia using the lens formula 1 divided by f equals 1 divided by v minus 1 divided by u. The power of the corrective lens is the reciprocal of its focal length, expressed in meters. The SI unit of power of a lens is diopter and is denoted by D. For example, if the focal length of a corrective convex lens is 80 cm or 0.8 meter, its power is equal to the reciprocal of 0.8, which is 1.25 diopter. This brings us to the end of this lesson on the human eye. In this lesson, you have learned about structure and working of a human eye, defects of vision and their correction, and power of lenses. To revisit the key points covered in this lesson, please review the flashcard at the end of this lesson.